Hey guys, welcome back to Left Seat, Right Seat. I'm CJ once again. We got Jeff here with me today as well. And today we have a very special guest, Shante. She is a therapist and she will be talking to us today about EMDR and how that could help with any kind of trauma, which would be PTSD, or you stubbed your toe and you're still mad about it. So let's go ahead and let's get started with this.
Or they stole your Doritos.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Shante, could you tell us about first? You can tell us like where people could find you, and then what EMDR actually is and how it can help and everything is that.
All right. Like you said, my name is Shante Breitenbach. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. Just a disclaimer. Anything you hear is not to be mistaken for psychiatric or psychotherapy. Please go find your professionals in the states that you live in. I am new to EMDR. I just finished my training on the 12th. It was a week-long crash course. They usually do it in 2 sessions, 2 long weekends. And it was intense. It's 40 hours of work. So it was 8 to 5 for 5 days straight, with practicum training in the middle of it. But what EMDR is, if you go to Francine Shapiro's website, she's a creator of EMDR, it's EMDR.com, you'll see what she kind of envisioned when it happened. So some of the backstory is that she was walking in the park when she was thinking about some really serious stuff. She had cancer in the 80s. That is not a good diagnosis then. So she was thinking about that stuff. Yeah, but
for younger listeners. Sorry.
So she had cancer and she was thinking about some distressing memories. And she was walking, which is also a form of bilateral movement. And her eyes were darting back and forth. And when she noticed that her eye movements were helping desensitize the effect, like she could still think about it, but she wasn't getting that strong emotional response, she systematized it and created a protocol to administer eye movements to clients and then ran a study. The study had 22 individuals with traumatic memories. So half of them received EMD and the other half didn't. Well, what happened was their emotional response to the events went down, and their validity of they did, like, let's say something bad happened and they're like, what they really wanted to believe about the situation was, I did the best I could. When people who have PTSD think about a bad situation, they don't believe they did what they could. They don't believe what really happened. And so when she did this research, she found that the change in what they believe to be a positive cognition about the event went up. And the people who didn't get PTSD, they just felt really crappy about it. And in fact, some of them were re-traumatized by being reminded of the event with no treatment over and over again.
And that's called what? What do they call that when we do that?
Re-traumatizing people?
Well, there's a name for it though. Like it's the type of therapy. What type? It's the normal type of therapy, right?
I know what you're talking about. Exposure.
Yes, exposure.
Okay, so the one that you've probably seen because tend to do this with vets is prolonged exposure. So what they'll do is they'll have them either write out in word for word what happened, and then read it over and over again until they stop getting a response.
That seems wild.
It works. I've done that with some other things. Yeah.
So it can work if you're willing to deal with the pain. It takes a lot longer, and it can be scary. And some people who don't complete it end up a little bit worse because they can't deal with going back there, especially if it was really bad. It can be damaging. Prolonged exposure can be damaging to some people if you're not ready for it or prepared. So that's why she created a protocol. You don't just go up and start wiggling your fingers in people's face.
Okay.
Right? So the 8 phases are as phase 1 is history and treatment planning and target planning, right? So we're going to get your entire background, what exactly we're talking about, how it's affected you, what do you want to see different in treatment, right? Phase 2 is preparation. If you don't trust your therapist enough to help you get through this stuff, it's not going to work, as with any therapy. right?
Mhm.
So we teach you different techniques to calm yourself, because if you're gonna, even for a moment, relive some of these memories, we have to know that you can calm yourself down efficiently, and when you leave here, you're not gonna freak out on us, or get messed up yourself a little bit more. So different things we teach people: breathing techniques, visualization, uh safe. No, we don't use the word safe with veterans and first responders. We use secure place, because if you've seen some of the stuff we've seen, you have an understanding of the world, that the world isn't safe, so that doesn't resonate. And we did find, and then some people have found that the whole visualizing your happy place doesn't work with first responders and veterans.
Interesting.
And so
That's cool. I mean, it's not cool, but
Is that
it's-
why, like,
I've
have
never
a
heard that
visceral
before.
response to whenever they say, "Oh, we need our safe space," and I'm like, "You mother." Like, shut
or you tend to laugh if somebody tells you to go to your happy place, because you can't see it in your head.
Right.
Well, I see a Happy Gilmore movie is what I see. So
Right.
Right. That's me. Yeah.
But you don't get a calming effect from going to visualizing someplace calming and secure in your head. That actually does work for people, but a lot of veterans, it just doesn't seem to click. They can't do it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. And that one specifically, total side note, but that one specifically, you have to be careful when you're prepping and, walking somebody through guided imagery for a safe place or a happy place, because if their happy place is their home, we have to make sure bad things didn't happen to them there.
Right.
Because if we take you back to a happy place and then you're in the middle of reliving a traumatic experience, and then you magically remember something that happened to you at that place, then we just added more stuff on top of everything else. So, so preparation is really important, to make sure that you can calm yourself, because we don't want you like freaking out on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
So phase 3 is access and activate, or in some cases, Francine, I got to go back and say this. The protocol that I'm using came from a company that teaches EMDR. The owner of that company was taught by Shapiro, but he altered some of the protocol that makes more sense to how we use it today, and it gives a little bit more leeway. So phase 3 for him is access and activate, right? That is, we bring up the memory and make sure it's the right one, right? And then phase 4 is processing, where we start with actual eye movements. Phase 5 is installation. That's where, okay, so if you say my original thought is, I'm not important, or I'm not worthy, or something like that, and you want the new one to say, I'm okay as I am. So we have you think of the distressing event, and now you're going to think of, instead of thinking I'm not worthy or I'm useless or something, you're going to think of I'm okay.
Right.
So we're pairing a positive thought to that original negative memory. Right?
Are you just thinking of the memory, or okay, the patient just thinking of the memory, or are they talking it out, or?
No, they don't have to say anything, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
I said, think of whatever it is, and they go, okay, I got it. They don't have to give me any details.
Okay, mind out. How do you know that it's that's the right memory, right? Because a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I'm really upset because like, my kid scratched my car. I'm really mad at that. But then like, you got to go back like to when he was actually a kid, and then he's like his dad got mad at him or beat him for scratching the car, or something. So like, how do you know?
So what are you saying?
Right? So what are you saying right now? Okay, I'm sorry.
I get what you're saying. Okay, so in phase 1, when we're doing history and target planning, so we tell you to think of so depending on what it is, right? We tell you to think of a current event, so whatever brought you in, whatever your present irritation is. I'm upset about X. So how did you feel about it? How did you feel about yourself? What's your negative cognition, right? And so you're saying, I'm powerless. If that's your negative cognition, I'm powerless. Well, tell me when the last time you felt that way, when's the worst time you felt that way, and when's the first time you felt that way.
Gotcha.
Right? So, and then tell me about a time when in the future you might feel the same way again. So we do past, present, and future targets to get that, because I understand what you're saying. Like, what if this person thinks this is the bottom target, the touchstone, you call it, and it's not? Well, if it's not, then we're still going to have emotional responses, similar situations. Right. We know that we got the touchstone when we get spontaneous behavior change, and then they're no longer, that feeling of I'm powerless doesn't resonate at all.
Gotcha.
Right?
All right.
So, phase 6.
Okay, so I have a question then.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, you're talking to someone about this, so you're going to revisit the same, let's say, incident or mission, medevac mission for an example? Like, do you revisit that same mission until it changes?
So
each week?
how do we know if it changes or not?
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean,
during,
before you deal with one before you go to other stuff, I guess.
you do one at a time.
Okay.
And so what we would do is that, like, for example, if it's a specific mission, right? We have you bring up the mission, you identified how you felt about it. I know what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about. I know how you're, like, where you are on our scales. I ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how distressed are you?
Right.
So then I do a set of eye movements. So it's just back and forth, right? I do a set of eye movements, and then I stop and say how, and I ask you again, 1 to 10, how are you? And typically that number will go down, and we go until that number stops dropping.
During that one session.
Right, we can.
Okay.
Or if we're scheduled for an hour, if we close up early to make sure that people can put things back in their containers and kind of go have their life. But we go until you go on that one session until that's 0. Right. And then you switch over to how did you want to feel about that? So if you have a bad mission and you felt powerless. Right. Where's my list? I just had it up to. So sorry, I just had this page up. Okay, so you have a bad mission. I'm powerless, and what you want to think about that mission, however bad it went, was I can recognize what I can and cannot control.
Right.
So then we have you think of the same example, the same mission, and then we do the eye movements with you thinking I can recognize what I can and can't control until that belief on a scale of 1 to 7 is a 7. So now when you recall that mission, you don't feel I'm powerless. You feel I can recognize what I can and can't control.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay. So what we do is when you're thinking about it, you got the scale of 1 to 10 on distress and the scale of 1 to 7 on validity of cognition. And what we mean by that is what's the adaptive or preferred belief. So when we have a bad situation, we don't want to believe I'm powerless. We want to believe I did what I can. So then you bring up that. So if somebody asks you about that mission, you could tell them about the whole thing in great detail, have no bodily response, and say, it was bad, but I did what I could. That's the result.
Okay.
And if done correctly, that's the result every time. We got therapists that say they're having 80% rate with EMDR.
Right. Over what time? What kind of time period are we talking about?
Depends on the condition. It depends on the condition. Because you might have, most people are complicated because, we're complicated people.
All right.
We got a whole lot of brains in here. Most people have more than one target. They have more than one negative cognition, and every negative cognition has its own neural network.
Right.
So have you ever laid down and just let your mind wander and you're confused by why it pings back and forth to things that don't seem connected?
Yeah.
Okay. If you do that, right, what that is, that's one neural network. You usually have an underlying belief for that one neural network, but all those memories are connected on them. So if we knock out the touchstone the first time you felt that way or the worst time you felt that way, it'll change the neural network.
Gotcha.
So you can, in fact,
that's the theory, right?
Theory, right. That's theory. So in some people, if you get the touchstone, you found the first time that event changed their behavior, they will have a spontaneous behavior change and understanding of their whole life. And they'll be like different people.
Right.
So that's how it works theoretically.
So taking that for vets, right, who have maybe multiple traumas, right?
Right.
I mean, this is something that might happen over weeks to months to years, potentially. Right. This type of therapy. So is the VA using it now, or is it something that people can ask for at the VA? I know you don't work at the VA, but
I don't work at the VA. From what I understand, it's one of the only. It's if you go to I think it's ptsd.va.gov. It's listed as an approved modality.
Okay.
ptsd.va.gov. So EMDR is one of those approved modalities for. But the thing is, the training's kind of expensive. So I don't know how many people,
at the VA have that training.
Yeah. I don't know where it is, so let's see. I forgot where it is on this page, but it is one of the approved, modalities for it. And so if they have a therapist who can do it, they have it available. So here's the problem. So Where's my screen? So in this book, The Body Keeps Score by that guy, Bessel Kolk. He's one of the OGs of trauma treatment. The guy's tried everything, done everything, worked for the VA in the 80s with the Vietnam vets that were kind of terrorizing their towns wherever they were.
Okay.
Well, you've seen all the old movies and you've heard all the stories. Like, these people came back damaged and people just pretended that they were weak-willed.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so, like, they could keep it together long enough to hold a job. Some could and some couldn't, you know? And they were just kind of like, we think it's shell shock.
Right.
Like, treatment for PTSD. In fact, PTSD didn't have a diagnosis until the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But they know it existed. Hell, if you were diagnosed I think it was a German army, they said that you were weak-willed and you shouldn't have been a soldier because you weren't strong enough.
Wow.
And so what they found out later is, after doing a bunch of research, is that people who were traumatized as children are more likely to become traumatized as adults. So, and any life-threatening event can traumatize a person. Anything where you perceived your life was in danger, whether it was or wasn't, is going to leave a mark. Okay. But if you've had that feeling since childhood, those situations tend to make you more sensitive to the likelihood of getting traumatized again. And so
it's just like stroke, right?
So here's
they're easier to get it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess my question with that, though, is based on what you said. They say there's like, is it diagnosis these days? People coming out of Iraq, Afghanistan, and those wars, that we're seeing more cases of PTS stuff, or is it just
that's
people
a
more traumatized
touchy one? That's a touchy one. So it's column A, column B, and column C. Okay. So column A and column B, yes, we have people. We are understanding now that people have implicit, like, developmental traumas. You know, like, they don't remember. You know, like kids that were adopted and got stuck in the foster system for the first 2 years of their life, and they can't understand why they always have behavioral problems. You know, like, we're fine. You know, that stuff. So yeah, and then the fact that a lot of poor people go into the military, you know, and those people tend to have harder lives. So yeah, we're finding a lot of early on trauma, and then they go into a very structured environment for security. And then column C would be that if you tell somebody you're having all these symptoms, you don't always have to show your instability to have PTSD. There are plenty of functioning people that have nightmares and anxiety and all kinds of other PTSD symptoms. And so I do think that there is some inflation of the PTSD rates, and that's just my opinion. Here's my personal experience. I had a person, when I was playing roller derby, I had a guy come up to me and said, "You're a veteran." And I said, "Well, yeah." And it was this funny story that I slept through a rocket attack in Afghanistan. And I guess I was telling the girls about it one day, and this guy's like, "Well, you have PTSD." And I was like, "No, sir, I don't." Well, then he tried to trigger me.
Seriously?
He got in my face and put the brim of his hat up to my forehead, and he's like, "Yes, you do." And he tried to trigger me. So if I had an anger reaction to him, that'd have been validating. But the truth is, I just thought he was a fool. Yes, I was mad, but not because I triggered. I'm mad because you're an ass. Like, you shouldn't have been that in my personal space. Well, it's kind of hard to prove PTSD without a brain scan. Right? But we know people from their dysfunctional lives have it. Well, I have met some people who said they have PTSD, and some of the things that they're saying don't line up. So, like I was saying, in this book, he talks about how a lot of treatments, when they're doing their research, don't work on veterans because it's kind of hard to show improvement for a condition that you're being paid for.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Because if you start getting better, you start losing money. Because you have to have a paper trail of you still have symptoms in order to still get paid for it. It's not a one-time check.
Gotcha.
So if your medical record with the VA shows that you have shown improvement, you start losing money. Then you'll see a bunch of people scrambling to get evaluations and opinions and stuff like that, saying that they still have PTSD. And so it's I do think a lot of people got blown up. I do think a lot of people saw some messed up crap. And I do think a lot of people, the majority of people, but I do think there's a small amount of people who are trying to game the system.
Right. Okay.
So then there's this new class of people that I've recently run into. There's a guy with PTSD. He still has PTSD. He doesn't want it treated.
Right.
Because he likes getting the check, so he doesn't want it treated. And it also gives him an excuse to be a jerk to people.
Right.
And
I find that interesting.
You know, and then when you're talking to these people, you're like, you know, it's just really weird. Because they're like, he's like, well, I told my wife I can't handle it today. I'm like, he's like, I'm allowed to have my space. I'm like, you do realize you can get treatment? He's like, well, I don't have time for that right now. I'll do that later.
Right.
And I don't think he was faking by any means. I really do think that he's got some severe PTSD symptoms, but he just wasn't interested in getting them taken care of.
Right.
Well, there's nothing fun about admitting it and then stepping into that zone either. You know, it takes a lot of I don't know. It takes a lot of wherewithal to do that.
No, I agree. It's anybody who calls a therapist for any reason, it's a lot of buildup and bravery and courage that has to show up in order to just make a phone call, because you're worried that person's going to judge you, or you might know them, or they might know somebody that you know, and there's a lot of fear and stigma wrapped up into it. So anybody who's willing to say, I have this, I typically believe them. The people that I'm talking about, I saw when I was working on post. You know, they were coming through, they were in the process of getting out. They're like, well, and they tend to all want to talk about how much money you're getting and what you're doing and all this other stuff. And any veteran that I ran into, they're like, you're going to the VA, you know, you got your 50%. And I'm just like, what? And they're like, well, didn't you have PTSD? I'm like, no. They're like, you can get a little bit PTSD. I'm like, what? It's right. Like, these are conversations I had with active duty soldiers. And I'm like, are you for real?
Yeah.
Seriously? Or they're looking to blame everything bad that happens to them on that condition without even trying to see if it's something else.
Mm.
And so I applaud the soldiers who do realize what's going on, and they can get help and they want it and know that there is help, and people are still researching this, and, you know, it can be overcome. But there's a problem if they're so worried about the financial aspect of it, if they're going to lose money if they get treatment. It's kind of hand in hand, because we got, like, when we went to this training, they're going to, like, you know, if you got somebody who's a veteran who's pushing you, who's telling you to stop and slow down because they don't want all their symptoms to go away, just meet them where they're at and let them go. You know, or we were told that first responders will do the same thing. Like, police officers view their hypervigilance as a tool.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, it ends up being a little superstitious. It being vigilant is fine. When you're hyper vigilant, you're responding to everything.
Okay.
This is how people get shot.
All right.
Yes, there you go.
You see what I'm saying?
Full circle on that one.
Right. There's a difference between being vigilant and being, paying attention and knowing where your threats are and knowing where your areas of egress are. There's a difference to even the mouse on the floor. You can't tell the difference between a mouse and a pit bull. We got problems.
Right.
And that's where people are getting kind of screwy. They can't tell the difference between a mouse and a pit bull.
Do you see on the flip side, people who don't want to use, like, say, the VA system and are having issues, like, undiagnosed, and maybe they, you know, you're a private practitioner. Do you see people come in off the street like that? They're like, hey, I want to go join a, 3-letter agency or something like that, and I don't want to talk to the VA. I don't want a record. You see any of that?
I have not seen that, but I know what you're talking about. So that is a problem. Again, this is all my opinion, with people using their insurance, because that leaves a paper trail. If people just want to go in and see a counselor because they want some problems they got to deal with, then if they go private pay, then there's no extra third party looking into those records and files. So there's no labels to follow you, because if you see me private pay, I might not diagnose you. I might just help you. Mm-hmm. Unless you want a label, there's no point to labeling you. If I know what it is, we're going to go and take care of it and move on with your life. But with the insurance system, some people have to be diagnosed. in order for clinicians to get paid.
Mm.
Sure. That old insurance game.
So, yeah, and I take insurance, so
I want you to get
understand.
paid, so that's awesome.
No, I take insurance, so I understand, but depending on the person's job, I do explain that to them, but most people, it's not a big deal. They're just like, whatever, just I'm using my insurance. I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'm going to start like advertising specifically for trauma, because now that's like my goal is to be like a trauma professional. And so when I explain that, I'm going to have to explain to some people, like, depending on what your goals are, like, it'd be better off if you didn't use your insurance versus did. Because, I live amongst the working class. Like, we make enough money to show off occasionally, but not enough money to not use our insurance.
Right.
Right. So it is what it is. And that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And like, how hard is that going to be for you per se, right? If you're like a trauma and it's all you're like seeing all day is guys with trauma, does that like affect you as well too then as it goes on?
It can. In fact, they just added a diagnosis to DSM for that. Specifically, they were thinking about, it's called vicarious trauma. You'll see it in a lot of nurses, doctors, EMTs, firefighters, police officers, and therapists.
Wow.
If you're sitting around, especially if you're a child trauma therapist, sitting around listening to little kids and parents tell you about how everything bad has happened in their life, it's going to get to you eventually.
Yeah.
So yeah, we get beat over the head with things like, self-care, and whatever that means to you is whatever that means to you. At the moment, I'm lifting weights. So usually for me, that means physical exercise.
Yeah.
So that's how I deal with that energy.
Yeah. So then how do they have like therapists that specify or, are specific to that, like trauma from like is it the vicarious trauma or something, or
trauma is trauma, and it's like we call it vicarious trauma because you didn't experience it, but now you've got the symptoms, so you're dreaming up what the clients told you, or if you're a nurse or a doctor or a medic for that matter, you're all the stuff that you saw trying to save people stuck in your head.
Gotcha.
And so you'll have the same trauma symptoms, but the where it originated is different. That's the only difference. So trauma is trauma.
All right. Wow, that's crazy. That's pretty interesting right there. Yeah.
Well, back to EMDR, we had a couple questions from earlier about reasons not to use it and some side effects potentially.
Right.
You want to talk about some of that now?
Okay. So people that we don't do EMDR on, depends on what modality. So like I said, EMDR is several modalities. It's anything bilateral. So it's either eye movements, so usually a hand or a wand or a light bar with a light flicking across this bar. It's the TAC scan, vibrating buzzies in the hand, or it is tapping on the arms and legs, or the person will tap on their own knees. The people that we don't do this with is any female in the first trimester of her pregnancy. And we'll just wait until they're out of first trimester, because first trimester is very sensitive. And like doctors have been telling people for years, don't tell people you're pregnant until you're out of the first 12 weeks, because you can still spontaneously abort in the first 12 weeks. So we don't want to add any extra stress and trauma on that person. People that we would not use eye movements with, or anybody with a closed brain injury, a TBI, or they've been blown up, anybody, any brain jostling, repeatedly concussed, anybody sensitive to light, or have a history of migraines, it can be done. In Francine Shapiro's book, or was it? No, it's in the Body Keeps Score. He did EMDR on a guy with one eye. So it's possible. So you just have to be careful. But the closed brain injury, we're going to use tactical stimulation. Tactile. Tactile.
You always want to be tactical, right?
Yeah, right. Tactile stimulation. And then some people incorporate sounds. They'll put headphones on you and you'll have a noise pinging in one earphone to the other. And so
I just had a question come up when you were saying that. You said tapping on the knees. Is this something someone can do to themselves?
That is an interesting question. Okay, so for soothing purposes, I know people that do it themselves, but we try to tell people don't do it by themselves because they don't know what hole they're going to fall into and can they get out by themselves.
Okay, cool.
Right? So but there are some people who claim they have done it to themselves and have processed all their issues by themselves. So if you go on YouTube, I don't advise this. If you like go to search for EMDR examples, you'll see a lot come up, or how to do EMDR on yourself. We don't advise that.
Sure.
At all. Simply because we do a treatment plan specifically to link different neural networks so that we know we're staying in the same frame, right? And so the protocol that I was taught, there are different modalities. We have EMD, which is where I'm watching your affect and I'm managing your affect. If I think you've had too much, I will back off, right? There's EMD little r, where we're both sharing that responsibility. You'll tell me to keep going, or we'll change up how long the sets are. The sets of eye movements or stimulation are based on how you feel, and I think you can handle it, right? So we're both managing. And then unrestricted, you're pretty much on your own. And people tend to say EMDR doesn't work because the therapist went too fast and just let them go unrestricted, and their brain's going everywhere, and they're not sure what is happening. Right? So when somebody tries to do it by themselves, processing, it gets dangerous. Now, on the second hand, there's a doctor, I think it's Amy Sarin. Her website is called ilovetouchpoints.com. She created a set of buzzies that you could take home with you. But she has them systematically, like they have a wave pattern. So she has them set for calm, for focus, for sleep, and they're for kids and adults, and they will calm you down. But they're not designed for processing difficult memories.
So you just hold them and they calm you down, but you don't really like go through a pathway and try to think like, oh, why am I so upset right now?
It's just to ease the frayed nerves. That's all that is.
Gotcha.
So yes, there is bilateral stimulation that you can do on your own to help ease all those emotions and keep everybody under control, or help little kids focus, but not for processing on your own.
Gotcha. That's cool.
So the possible side effects, right? So reprocessing old memories can bring up associated memories. You may not be aware of some of those memories. Okay. Sometimes during sessions, clients may not only have the emotional response to reliving a memory, they might have the physical sensations also. So if you were physically attacked in any way, you might relive the physical sensations during the session. Okay. And processing a memory.
That's pretty heavy.
That is pretty heavy. And so processing a memory can continue after the session ends. So you were still processing. So you might feel shaky when you left, but like the next day you come back, overnight your brain is still going and trying to organize all the stuff you just stirred up.
Yeah. Is that because you were processing one memory, but something else came up, so you weren't dealing with that underlying memory? Does that make sense the way I asked that?
No, your brain will continue to process even if you stayed on the same memory. So the brain will continue to process after. It's like shaking up a soda can.
Okay.
You got to wait for everything to settle down, and it doesn't settle down after you stop shaking it.
Yeah.
Right? It takes some time.
That's a good analogy.
So if I shook you up and then sent you home after an hour, you're going to take some time to wind down, so your brain is still going.
Right.
And so other memories, flashbacks, or feelings or session issues may occur, but you may also have dreams associated with the memory. So if you're a person who doesn't usually remember their dreams and magically you're having lucid dreaming, it might scare you. So if I don't warn you of these things that is possibility of happening, it could freak you out and then you won't come back. Right? And so if you're in distress, let me know, and then we can work through those things. Because, sometimes even when we're trying to process these old memories, you might have a new crisis we might have to take care of first. So there might be a gap in processing. So we might have to do just traditional talk therapy during a session just to deal with your current crisis or anything that you want to do. Or the next session you don't want to process because you want to talk about all the stuff that happened during the processing. Because during processing, a lot of talking isn't happening.
So I have a question on that, though. It's like, with the lucid dreaming, do you tell them that's a possibility and then give them ways to like, with lucid dreaming, you like can control your dream or realize that you're in the dream and then walk through it, right? Like I'm looking at this as that it could actually be a good thing and a bad thing, like, because if you can control the dream, because like with people who do lucid dreaming, they're like, oh, look in the mirror, all right, count to 10, pinch yourself, and there's another one that just they'll say that you're dreaming 3 times, like I'm dreaming, whatever. And then once you do that, you can like control that dream or whatnot, right? Like, does that help them actually like go through that dream or not?
It could. I don't do dream work personally.
Okay. Gotcha.
So if I tell people, I just tell them to be aware that they're dreaming. Like, try to, if you have a lucid dream, if they know how to control it and do that stuff, then go for it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I just tell people to be aware of it. So I don't give them any instructions on what to do.
Gotcha.
So if they came back in the next session and said, what should I do? Then I put the question back on them. How do you want the story to end?
Gotcha. Okay.
So that gives them the power to control these things. And it's not my therapist told me.
Right.
Then it gives that person back that power.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I had a question that just came up. I was curious about medications associated with this. Does this affect this type of therapy, or I don't know. Do you not recommend medications with this therapy, or does it matter?
I asked that question too, and they said it's gonna be therapist judgment of sobriety, right? Like, so there are certain drugs that just the mechanism in which they work wouldn't make this feasible, right?
Okay.
So
okay,
you're sticking.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So there are certain drugs that just won't make this feasible. So we want people as sober as possible. But if they're so severely depressed that they can't function and the antidepressants got them out of their bed and into your office, you want to give it a try.
Right.
It's worth a try. Okay.
It's worth a try. But if they're on like heavy stuff like benzos, Klonopin, Ativan, Xanax, then, that's when you need to call their doctor and see what can be done, because, the way those things work, I think they do cut off the connection from the body to the head.
Right. Yeah.
So when in part of this, you got to be able to feel your body.
Right. Like, I know a lot of those people that are on those, they're like, well, I know what I'm doing. It just doesn't affect me. Like, I don't.
Yeah. The best example I heard was a guy who has a history of panic and anxiety attacks. And he said that he was in the middle of a anxiety attack and his body was responding as it was a panic attack, but his head didn't have any idea what was going on.
Right.
He's like, I wonder why my skin is clammy. I wonder why my heart is racing. Like, his head didn't have any idea what was going on in its body. And what people forget is that, you can't compartmentalize your feelings. Your feelings just don't occur in the limbic system. That's where they start.
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about it, why do we say I feel sick when you're upset?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you think about what does sadness feel like? Sadness feels heavy, right? Anger feels like excessive energy.
Yeah.
Right? Rage feels like your body's tingling.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Anxiety and other anxious kind of things of mentality, your body tends to feel like it's closing in on itself. People that are anxious tend to sit all like this, or, and anger, I kind of runs into anxiety kind of, right? And then that relief, when they're calmer, everything tends to open back up. So all that stuff happens across the chest.
Gotcha.
So when people tell me they got a chest pain and I'm like, should I go to the doctor? I'm like, that depends. Is it a sharp pain, or is it a pain growing, like an ache running across your shoulder blades? Because if it's an ache running across your collarbone, it could be anxiety. Right? And depression.
Do you as a therapist see these things loosen up, I guess you could say, when you're doing stuff like this?
I see it loosening up even with regular talk therapy. Like, you'll see a difference when somebody comes in and they're grinding their teeth and their face is all clenched and and they come in and they're all chill. And I'm like, oh, you feel better. They're like, how do you know? I said, because you're not sitting like this in my office all like Quasimodo'd and stuff, man. Like, so like when you can tell people's moods when they actually loosen up. Like, I've always been good at reading people. Like, now I just have all the names for it.
Right.
Like, side note, when we were in the Army, like, did you guys know the flight platoon leader would come to me? Now, the flight NCO would come to me and ask me who was ready to go to flight platoon.
No.
That happened for years. They're like, which one of the guys is ready? And I was like, go talk to that guy and that guy.
Right.
I was like, that guy is an idiot. Keep him here. And I was really good at reading
right now.
Huh?
I said, you are exactly where you're supposed to be right now, aren't you?
Right.
Well, I don't know if CJ
I'm
remembers
just saying, like, going from there to here.
Yeah. I don't know if CJ remembers this, but when I decided to go back, to school for the third time, he called me and told me that we had an extra year of GI Bill money because they just changed the plans over. And I was like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And I was like, what do you think? And he goes, duh. And I called like 4 other of my friends and they're like, I don't know why you just didn't do that in the first place. And I was mad for like a week. I'm like, if all you people knew what I should have been doing in the first place, why'd you go let me get that other degree? Like, that was just wasted money that I'm still paying for.
All right.
So like,
it wouldn't have worked until you decided, right?
I guess so. That's the way therapy works. I can tell you.
Right.
I guess the way therapy works, like I can tell you that the sky isn't falling all day long, but it doesn't work. You'll stop hiding when you believe the sky isn't falling.
All right.
Like I just gotta help you get there. I just gotta keep showing you that it's not. I don't have to say anything. I just gotta hold your hand and go, okay, what's going on right now? Tell me what you think. Tell me what you feel.
Yeah. You might know the answer, but they gotta find the answer for themselves, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really funny because, like I said, there was a core group of us who kind of ran the hangar floor. Like you didn't get any work done without coming through us.
Yeah.
And so I knew all the mechanics. I knew it was going to work and I knew what people were doing. And so like they would come and ask me, they're like, who's ready? And I was like, that guy's got an attitude. He's smart, but he's got an attitude. So you're going to have to go deal with him first, So like we had to do a lot of that stuff. It was an interesting time. So I've been doing this my whole life, but now I'm just licensed.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Cool. I like those stories. I really like those stories. I'm always fascinated how people come to do what they do and why they make the decisions they do. And then, then they pursue it, right? Like even MOSs and things like that. I was always amazed how people decided to do what they do beyond what, the recruiter told them they're doing. But you know what I mean?
That's actually a funny story because I wanted to be EOD, but they weren't taking females when I came in.
Nice.
So I wanted to blow stuff up, and they weren't taking females. So
do they now?
They do now. I got
do
right when I left, I got a postcard saying that they wanted me to come join EOD, and I was like, I was too late. I'm not re-enlisting. But I wanted to be EOD when I joined, and my dad told the recruiter, if she comes back EOD, you're gonna have to find a new place to live. So he's like, what else is she good at? Well, I scored off the chart for electrical.
Really?
Right.
I have a mechanical aptitude. And
now you're just dealing with brain connections instead of avionic connections.
Exactly. Right. And like, so during my interview for my grad school, they were like, isn't that a big jump? I'm like, no, it goes from how things work to how people work. It's actually pretty linear. And they're just like, whoa.
She's on the team.
Yeah.
Put her on the team now.
Speaking of which, I got a baby mechanic. He was trying to put his high chair back together when he was like 18 months old. Like,
nice.
The kid's a mechanic. He sleeps with a crescent wrench in his bed.
I'm not surprised by that.
Right.
Both his parents are mechanics. So
right. I'm saying, yeah.
So what other questions do you have for me? So I did a pretty crazy job of explaining that. This thing is way more, there's a lot of nuance. It's a very complicated process. But if anybody is listening, they find that their therapy isn't working. It's not that your therapist is a bad therapist, the therapist isn't working. If your therapist knows how to do this, ask them to give it a try because it could get things unstuck. What they don't tell you is that EMDR works for other things other than PTSD, what we call the small T traumas, right? Things that left you anxious or left you depressed or left you just a little off kilter. It can clean that stuff up too.
All right.
It's not just for like, it was tested because it works so well with trauma, but it does actually help with the other stuff too. Mm-hmm. And that's where people, isn't that a trauma? Yeah, it works for trauma. That's where it was tested, but it does work for the other stuff. So like if you, like little kids, like you were saying, you hit mom's car one time and she picked you up and shook you. Now you don't go near anybody else's car. Cars make you nervous. Like that kind of stuff. It can clean up that. That's what we call a small T trauma, right? Yeah. Memories that were implicitly, like stuck in your brain there at that point in time.
Gotcha. And did we go over all the steps? I think you got to like step
No,
6. Are there any more steps
I got
than
to
that?
step 6. Yes, there's actually 8.
Oh, okay.
Step 6 is body scan. So once we have somebody who's done processing, we tell them, okay, where does that feel in your body? And they're like, well, I'm feeling some tension here, here, here. Then we have them think of that tension, and then we'll do eye movements again. And then we call that just cleaning up a little bit, because you can have residual tension in your body from reprocessing all those memories. Step 7 you do at the end of every session is closure. You find out where people are, what they're still, if we're not done processing, we have them do what we call the container exercise, where you put things back in your storage unit in your head. So you know how, if you think about it, this place exists already. In your head, there's a place where all the bad stuff that you deal with, that you stick and you stuff in the corner until you're ready to deal with it. So we just have you visualize what that container looks like.
Mine looks like a Connex, green, Maybe
a little rusty, dusty.
Right.
But by giving it some color and shape and feeling, it's easier for you to access.
Gotcha.
Right? So some people just need a name. Like, what do they call it? I name mine the emotional baggage storage unit. So
nice.
So
EBSU.
We have people just, I call it the EBSU. So people put that back together, so we don't have them leaving our office agitated if we didn't get done processing that day. And then step 8 is actually for the next session, which is reevaluation. How'd it go? How'd your night go? How'd your week go? What happened? Where are we going to start today? And then you start all over again. And then you pick up at step 3 and you access, activate, and just go through the steps again. Shapiro's original steps looked a little bit different, but not by much.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
So the protocol that I learned, if you have somebody who's like extremely unstable, we alternate step 1 and 2. So instead of me doing treatment, because we forget as therapists sometimes that just by getting your history, we can traumatize you.
Yeah.
Right. So if we do an intake and then we say, okay, if somebody just breaks down on your couch, that's when we start with resourcing, that's what we call it, and stabilization. So I help you learn how to calm yourself so that we can get work done when we're sitting in here. And those things can be used outside, like, acupressure, like pinching that spot and breathing deeply, deep breathing. There's one called like the butterfly breath, but we tell people don't call it that. He suggested for veterans call it like eagle of fear or something. I don't know, some crazy thing. He said nobody wants to hear butterflies. And you just like massage the points under your collarbone while you're taking deep breaths. And if you think about the way it works, it's smoothing out those spots to get knotted when you're anxious.
Right. Okay.
The spot like directly under your collarbone, there's like 2 soft spots, and it smooths them out. Things that you don't realize you do already. People that are anxious, they rock their hands back like this. That calms you down too.
Yeah.
And so we teach people these little tricks and things to keep themselves a little bit more contained while we're doing these processes. But Shapiro's looked a little bit different. Hers was trauma history, stabilization, then assessment, because we do a pile of assessments. We need to know what we're dealing with. So we do give assessments. I've got combat exposure assessment, the Beck inventories, life event scales, like just making sure I can see what I'm dealing with. We do all these assessments and then we start processing. So that's the only like major difference between Shapiro's scale and the one that I learned, or protocol. But like they all have the same output. It's just it's really cool to see a modality show up that can help so many people with a lot less of just sitting there and talking, because like that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
It works for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for everybody. Some people just don't want to say what happened. And so if you say, okay, what event are we dealing with today? Well, this event with my brother. And all you gotta do is say, I don't want to give any details. I'm like, that's good. Bring up the event. What are you noticing? Whatever that is, notice that and just keep going. Like, I don't have to get details in order for it to work.
Gotcha.
It's fascinating. Totally fascinating.
Yeah. Blew my mind.
Yeah, no,
like how do you feel about having this tool in your arsenal? Like, do you think this is a I don't know, a therapy multiplier in a way? Like, are you pretty happy with
like
this?
I think it's like it'll be, for lack of a better analogy, instead of using it, it's like your favorite tool, the one you use regardless, right? So you can use it with everything. It shouldn't always. So like a picture it like a Gerber. You got it in your pocket. It's like your secret weapon. You don't leave home without it. It's not always appropriate every time. And you know that. If you try to use it and something stops, you back up and go get the right tool. But like for the most part, it can solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
It's neat. I mean, it seems like it has a lot of potential, more than maybe. I mean, because I've heard of it years ago. I'd heard of it years ago, but I'm surprised it's not more out there now than it is. But we'll get the word out, of course.
Yeah, it's just like, and there's a lot of people who like will put comments up on like Twitter and YouTube. They're like, this doesn't work and this will backfire. And I'm like, well, you might have had a new therapist that may have tried to rush you because they're just so excited about it. They want to get you moving so quickly. And we have to go as slow as the patient or client wants to go. And that's like, that can trip things up. That's this instance where it might not have worked. It might not work if the client doesn't trust you enough to tell you they're using drugs. That might not work. If the client is far more traumatizing than you or they realize complex trauma, you just have to go a lot slower. A lot slower.
All right. And then, I guess, how do you know, like, how to progress, like the pace of progression? Is it like at step, was it 5 or 6 when you like talk about it and like see where they're at kind of thing, right? Or
how do you know if it's working or not?
Well, no, I mean, like you say, like, you might have got a new therapist that's rushing you and going too fast. Like, how do you know? How do you know how to pace the progression as the therapist? Like, how do you know how to pace that progression?
Start slow and let the client tell you to speed up.
Right. Well, okay. So I get that. Well, what I'm trying to say is like, how do you know like when to move on or how to like? I'm trying to say like, what like are there like any like milestones or keys? That like say, oh, we've reached this point now, let's move on to something or let's move past.
So remember when I said that we have like the subject units of distress scale, the scale of 1 to 10.
Right.
When that number is 0, we go into installation, and once the installation is 7, so we want the SUD at 0 and the VOC at 7. Once that target's done.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Gotcha. What I mean by pushing too hard, too fast, we can alternate how fast we do eye movements or how long we do them. So processing speed is about that fast. Right. And if you find somebody can't follow your fingers or they're all moving around because you're supposed to keep your head straight and follow the fingers. If you see somebody's doing this, then you're doing stuff. You got to slow down for them, right? And then have them keep up with you. So then another way is that if somebody is really sensitive, you're doing shorter sets. So I might just do this for 5 to 10 seconds versus 30 seconds or just letting them go until they tell me to stop.
All right. Okay.
So that's what I mean by rushing someone. They can't handle what their body is telling them. So if I just keep moving my hand back and forth and they're still processing and they're going stop and I don't stop, that's rushing them. So you organize a stop signal, because if they just start talking, they may be telling their attacker to stop, not you.
Right.
So you need to slow down. They got to put their hand up. So I know to back up and stop, because how long we keep the sets, how long we either turn on the buzzies or how long we move our hand back and forth in front of their face can extend that processing time.
Gotcha. So strapping them down and strapping their head down, it's probably not a good idea, because that might create a new trauma, right? If their head's doing all this, trying to follow your hand.
Clock. You're talking some Clockwork Orange stuff.
Yeah, just saying.
We don't do that.
Clockwork Orange?
Old school, like, therapy, where they, like, strap you down in the chair, your head's blocked in, and you can't do anything, That doesn't work.
That's a little illegal.
Oh, okay.
And they make you chew on the wallet, and then they zap you? Is that what you're
talking about? Do that.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Electrotherapy is still a viable treatment for depression.
Wow.
And so is magnetic resonance. So they'll strap you into a chair and put giant magnets on your head and turn them on.
Wow.
You're like both of your faces just went, what? But
I'm just thinking, like,
those are still treatments.
How? Okay. Wow. I can see kind of maybe the magnet one, but like electroshock, like
it still works.
I guess if it still works.
It's a treatment for what they call treatment-resistant depression.
I see. So it's like it's like a last line of defense.
They don't start with that. That's
no, we don't start with electroshock. Like if you've been on antidepressants and you're still upset, they add antipsychotics and you're still upset, you're still suicidal, you're still, everything, then they offer that as a last resort.
Okay. That makes me feel a little bit easier about that.
And there's I'm at the bar and there's a guy who's depressed. I shouldn't tase him with a taser. Like,
I don't think that's such a good idea.
Because you start somewhere. I would never do that.
No.
Hey, buddy, you look a little sad.
No, electroshock was, when they realized that the brain had electrical current, they figured it just needed to be reset.
Right, kind of like a heart, like at the
right. The same deal. Right. Yeah. It's the same thought.
Alt delete.
No, that's literally the basis behind it. Is like your electrical signals got mixed up. Let's fix it.
All right. Well, I mean, if they know how to actually use it nowadays, and you're not like torturing people like they used to do back in the day, then I think, all right, if I can, as long as they're not zapping me, all right, I guess. Right? I don't know. I still feel
it's kind of scary because we think of the old movies we saw.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Like, you're like strapped down in a chair, and they're like, stop. Oh, too bad. We're going higher. Like.
But yeah, I've heard they're still using that. It's kind of
Frankenstein stuff we're talking.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, there are people who've been trying to get relief from mental health disorders for centuries, for millennia, for as long as we've been walking upright, and so it is what it is.
Yeah.
And they'll try to do what they can do to help you, and if they've got research to back it up, it's more likely that it'll happen.
Good. Yeah. Well, that's true.
So EMDR seems like one of those new modalities, right? That not everyone knows about, probably, right? Is there any other thing
20 years old, so it's pretty new. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other ones out there, just for shits and giggles, that you're aware of that are being used these days to some effect? For specifically for veterans, PTS and trauma stuff.
Like the ecstasy drug.
Oh
therapy?
yeah, the drug trials. They're making. I think I just heard. I got an email a couple days ago. They just approved the nasal spray, antidepressant nasal spray.
Oh wow.
Then I've heard about the ketamine treatments. People
Does
are
the
saying
nasal spray work if you're congested?
I don't know. I haven't. I just saw it and I was like, what? It got approved. And then there's ketamine. I think they were using for depression. And then I heard about the MDMA for trauma and depression. And so, like, some of the test subjects are saying it was like having a year or two of therapy without having to, be on pills for their whole life. They went and got a shot and they feel better immediately. Yeah. And so they got to keep doing research to make sure that it's lasts and it's viable. It's interesting because, that old thing about drug companies creating conditions to cure them. Right. But the thing is, like, you can see when people are depressed, you can see what that does to them and their families. And so people want relief. And so I just don't know. I don't know a psychiatrist here because where I live, they tend to do old school stuff. Mm-hmm. People are still on Prozac here. And they think it's a wonder drug. It was when it first came out, but there's other stuff that's better. And I'm not a psychiatrist, but, you just see side effects, what they're doing to people. And so the drug companies, whatever is the most effective at the moment is what's going to get their money. And whoever's got the research behind it is how it's going to work.
Gotcha.
Well, it'll be really interesting to bring you back on after maybe you use EMDR in your practice and see some case study stuff. Not specific individuals, but like see anecdotally like what you're experiencing after a while.
Yeah, we had to try this on ourselves during our training.
Ah.
Okay.
And so I have seen it work. Like we had to do this on ourselves during training. Like that's how we practiced.
Nice. So like another therapist was like doing, the MDMR with you and then you did it to them or?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Well, yes. So I haven't seen it work and it was really cool because my partner, she always, I could see when it kicked in because her face would change and she would look confused for a moment. Like, wait a minute, I'm not still mad about this. And it's pretty amazing.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's pretty great. So yeah, no, that's cool. And then
I'm excited about it. I think it's
So I mean, and then and you said this is now in the DSM-5 book, right?
The DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Issues. It's got a long title. It's the big book of what's wrong. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
PTSD is in there. Though that's the book that if you go to the doctor and you're like this and this and this and this and this hurts my head or this doesn't feel good, that's the book where they go check, 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 check. You have this condition.
Gotcha.
And so PTSD was added to that book at DSM-3 in the 80s, and it's been there ever since.
Okay.
There's people who are advocating for a specific one for developmental trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Because, good for us, not good, so great for the public. Veterans tend to get all the money for PTSD research.
Right.
But they forgot that the rest of the world is also traumatized. You disagree with that statement?
What was that?
I was cut out.
I said
couldn't hear for 2 seconds.
I said veterans research tends to get a lot of the hype for PTSD research right now, and they're forgetting that the rest of the world was traumatized too.
Right, totally.
And
I agree.
And so most of the people that come in my office, whether it's for depression, whether it's for active trauma, whether it's they had something big happen at one point or another. Like when I read that book, The Body Keeps Score, like I started looking at people in a whole different way. Like you see that almost everybody, if they weren't, because you forget that traumatized people raise traumatized children. Because if your parents are erratic and unstable, then your kids view that as a trauma. And so like to them, because they don't know how to act in public because we're their models of how to act. Like you can look toward Al-Anon, right? There's a support group for the adult children of alcoholics because those children were traumatized by being in the house with adult alcoholics, with alcoholics. And so like, that's secondary trauma. It's like, it just happens one after another. And then some people are advocating for poverty to be considered as trauma. And so, because your life is different when you're living under the poverty line.
Yeah.
Like survival is all you know. And when you're in survival mode at all times, that does create some rifts in how you perceive the world. And so I think that this is a modality that can help a lot of people very quickly. In fact, Francine Shapiro, during Oklahoma City bombings, she deployed, a pile of therapists to Oklahoma City to take care of, these people that were traumatized from this bombing.
Right.
And did it, in some cases, they were relieved in 3 or 4 sessions.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good. Well, that's better than 5 years.
That's what I'm saying.
Being angry, right? Like,
there's people who've been in therapy and treatment for decades and with no movement, but they like their therapist, so they keep going. And it's not that the therapist is bad; it's just whatever they're doing isn't working.
Right.
And so, like, our profession has to do better about like just making sure that if you got no movement, like if it's not your relationship and it's not you, then maybe you need to find somebody who specializes a little deeper in whatever you got going on to make sure that person gets the help they need. Therapy isn't supposed to be forever.
Right. Yeah. I know I'm probably like guilty myself. Not probably. I am guilty, right? When people are like, "Oh, I've got PTSD from this car accident," I'm like, "Bro, a car accident? Come on now, you don't got no PTSD, right?"
I've got a friend with PTSD from car accidents. Every time she gets in a car, the car would crash. I don't know what it was. She was in 4 car accidents when we were in undergrad. And so whenever we're driving, the slightest hard stop, her hands are on the airbag, and she's like,
right.
And
that's what I'm saying. Like before, right? I would be like, "Man, you don't got no PTSD. Shut up, you little sissy," right? But now I'm just like, "All right, I guess," like I can see it now, like I'm not. It's not like specific to just being shot at or
and that's
blown
the way
up
it's
or anything
explained.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I realized, and then it's probably within the last maybe 5 to 6 years that I've come around on that anybody like oh man, my pot. The water overflowed and I got I was boiling water and it overflowed and now I got PTS or whatever from that. And I'm like, all right, well, cool. It's a possibility, whatever, but like, car accidents and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
just like it's hard because you don't want to minimize somebody else's what their view of trauma is.
Right.
But the thing is like we're looking at it from our only mode of understanding, which is internally. So if you don't understand, just go, all right, that's cool. I don't get it. Do you need me to get you help? That's cool. You just kind of normalize it, instead of saying nobody tried to kill you, you're being ridiculous.
Right.
For all we know, that guy who's pot boiled over and he's freaking out about it,
Yeah.
He could have done that as a kid, and his parents beat him within an inch of his life, and he's reliving it and having a flashback. That's what I'm saying. We don't know. He could have got strung up by his toenails for that when he was a kid. So every time a pot overflows, he freaks out.
Right.
Like we don't know. And so when we assume that because we know what life being in danger looks like, because we do,
right.
that we know what every version of PTSD and every flavor of it looks like, and that's just not true.
Right. And that's, I think that's, what it was for me. Like, I was looking at it. I was like, bro, I saw mortars and missiles coming in at me, blowing up, 20 feet away from me. Like, I've, been in the bird when the dudes were shooting at us on the roofs and stuff. I've had RPGs fly by me and all this other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that was fun. And I come back and I'm like, I don't feel like I have PTSD or I was traumatized about any of that, So then I look at you and you're like, a car accident? Really? Or whatever. So I think that's where I was. And then over the years, I definitely realized that, that is a real stupid and, simple way of me of thinking. That just because you're...
Wait, man, you grew up.
I know, right? In some aspects.
Maybe that one. Just that one.
Right, yeah.
That's called compassion.
You're on a nice roll.
Right. Yeah.
Compassion is
called
too.
Compassion.
I guess I got some of that at some point in life, Maybe it might have been 2.5 years ago when I had my son.
Became a daddy. Might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, we forget that when our kids are crying and they're crying like they're dying, that is the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, he doesn't get that purple dinosaur he's the worst thing. That is
the worst thing that's ever happened. If somebody said that to me and I was like, holy crap. That changed my mind. That statement changed my mind. He's like, it is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. They have only been on the planet for less than a year. That is the worst thing. And I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I think even with that, knowing this stuff and the little bit of psychology classes and all that stuff that I took in college and stuff, I was like, to know that my kid can have ingrained reactions and effects and emotions at 2 years old that will traumatize him, or not traumatize him, but will affect him till he's dead pretty much, his whole life. It's I look at that now and I'm like, man, that's really,
it's scary.
It's scary in a way because because now I'm like, how do I handle this in a way that doesn't affect him and traumatize him? And I don't care. I look at it and I'm like, I don't care how much for you it'll be easier for you. You've got years of studies, but there's still that thing in you that's I want to beat this kid's ass, or I want to yell at him, or do whatever.
Oh, good gravy! I have those moments too. Yeah. Okay, so they're 2 and 3. They're gonna push every one of our buttons 6 ways from Sunday. You know, and you're on your 3rd round of this stuff. So what happens is this: the average parent isn't gonna traumatize their kid, and as long as they correct their behaviors that they're afraid that they might have said something that's gonna affect them. As long as they correct it, they're fine. Your kids are going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's when we have consistent neglect, consistent, it's that consistent kind of BS that we see with kids that is what causes those feelings, those anxieties. If your kid is afraid of you, because we come from people who think that fear equals respect.
Right.
That's not true. If your kids are afraid of you, that's a problem.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you correct that and make sure your kids respect your rules and know that you're going to be treated as human beings, they just happen to know less than you, they will more likely to do what you think. There are critical moments. The first 8 weeks, a lot of brain development goes on. Whatever happened to mom while she was pregnant, because a kid can hear what's going on outside the belly its 2nd trimester.
Jeez. So it starts even earlier than 2.
Right. We just think it started at 2 or 3 because that's when they start talking and they can put words to their memories. So, as long as the parents aren't neglect or physical harm and they correct their behavior. So if your kid's acting up and the kid gets spanked and the kid has no idea why he got spanked, that's a problem.
Right.
Right. So I'm in the camp of over explain.
Yeah, I think I do that myself. Yeah.
I'm not averse. I'm not one of those people who's averse to corporal punishment. I just, that's my own personal opinion as a parent. But there are some people that say that you shouldn't hit your kids at all. You know, or there's some people who don't. I don't necessarily agree with the whole make your kids work out thing, or shaming them. You know, but
Right.
those are parenting choices. We'll see the research on that when your kids are older.
Right.
But as long as you're over explaining what you're doing, you're protecting your kid from any lifelong damage, I believe.
Nice.
And so like I think that we got to cut parents some slack, because like I freaked out for a little bit after I got all this information that I was traumatizing my kid. Like everything I did was going to traumatize him.
Right.
But
Right.
like potty training is a very critical point. So if you freak out about potty training, or if you have too many kids close together in age and then you're rushing the kids to get potty trained, you're going to end up with a little bitty control freak.
Gotcha.
Like,
Yeah.
like that's what happened, you know?
Mm.
Like, and so like you can do some things at different points. Like potty training is very critical. If your kid doesn't like being left alone, like try to figure out why. Don't just go man up. Like
Yeah.
saying those things do some damage.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I heard a man say to his 5-year-old, "I had a boy, not a girl. Stop crying."
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that's gonna leave a mark, because
Right.
instead of saying to your child who is crying, "Why are you crying?"
Yeah.
He said, "I had a boy, not a girl. Man up." It took everything in my body to turn my counselor brain off and not say something to that dude. I
Yeah.
didn't, so
Oh, so you've gotten better too.
I have. I didn't.
Control.
Yeah.
I thought about it, and I was like, that's how we end up with these whole, like, that idea of like this toxic masculinity. You're not allowed to say nothing. You're not allowed to have an emotion. You're not allowed to cry. So I have a little boy. When he's crying, I say, "Are you hurt?
Right.
There's something on you hurt. Let me look at you." And he goes, "I'm not hurt." I said, "Are your feelings hurt?" And he's like, "No." I go, "Then stop crying." So like, so if you're not physically or emotionally hurting right now, there is no crying, because we don't deal with whining, right?
Yeah.
That's how I differentiate from whining or not, right? And so every parent has their own different way of doing things. But that just works for us, because I don't want him to think that it's wrong for him to cry because he's a boy, but I can't have my kid whining because he didn't get Cocoa Puffs. So,
Right.
and so it's like, that's how parents just gotta figure out where that line is for them and be consistent. As long as you're consistent, you will not do as much damage as you think you're doing.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I only like brought up the child thing because, like, you were saying earlier that it's like so if you're traumatized as a kid, it's easier for you to be traumatized as an adult.
Right.
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 So
You set those pathways. So the old saying in psychology is neurons that fire together wire together.
right.
Right.
Okay.
So if X happens and Y happens
Birds
at
of
the
a
same
feather.
time, right? Same. Right. So if X and Y happen at the same time, every time X happens, you're going to be expecting Y.
Okay. Gotcha.
All those things tend to operate together.
Mm-hmm.
Like with your example of the pot boiling over.
Right.
Pot boils over, I get smacked. As an adult, pot boils over, I get anxious because I'm waiting to be smacked.
Right. Even though your parents are nowhere around to smack you.
30,000 miles away, you're still waiting to get smacked.
Right. Gotcha. All right, well, that's
So to bring it full circle, then EMD or EMDR
Mm-hmm.
can rewire some of those things that were miswired at one point.
Not necessarily.
That's what we're saying, right?
Rewiring,
Ultimately,
but it closes circuits. So imagine, we'll use electrical analogy. So imagine a wire, right? It gets a kink in it, right? And so like it builds up, and so every time you get something that gets near it, it kind of fizzes out. Too much power there, right? So we say your emotions have charge around an event. So a car accident, that's a kink. Every time you're in a car or somebody mentions a car accident, you start getting a little too charged.
Mm-hmm.
EMDR opens those currents back up so it flows correctly. So that car accident doesn't equal charge.
Let's go back to the pot analogy then, right?
Which one?
Like can you explain it with the pot analogy, right?
Okay, so if I treat that person with,
I think that's a good one, right? Go ahead.
So if I treat a person with EMDR, if they had an accident that they were punished severely for, right, and now they have an emotional charge, say severe anxiety every time a pot boils over. After the EMDR, the pot will boil over. They may still remember what happened, but they won't have the anxiety associated with it.
Okay.
So it loses its
what are we
emotional
saying?
charge.
It loses an emotional charge.
Right, and it goes back in line.
That.
Right. Desensitization, and it diffuses it. Correct.
Okay. We were using that analogy. I thought it'd be cool to just.
No, that's great. I did think that. Yeah. So,
cool.
like, yeah, when you had EMDR, did they explain that to you?
You know what? I just don't even remember now.
You don't remember?
I had the leads, and I remember when I would grab the leads and they'd turn it on, I would instantly start laughing. It was a strange effect, and I'd be like, "Why am I laughing right now?" He's like, "I don't know. That's just what it's doing to you." Every time, like every single time. It's pretty wild.
Wow.
And then ultimately, that dude I was seeing, that counselor, like he was reassigned to something, and I was like, I ain't going through this shit no more. I ain't gonna go sit down and bleed on a desk with a new person. I'm not doing it. You know what I mean?
That's a problem in our system.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, if you leave a counseling agency and you can't get a hold of the counselor you were seeing, or that person isn't practicing anymore, if things were left undone, we're supposed to have a plan to refer you to a counselor to pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I may have dropped some F-bombs and said sayonara. But I can tell you that from what we've talked about, and this is an example for me, there was a mission I had that I was able to resolve in the time frame I was with that guy, right? And not to get deep into the mission or anything, but it was a mission at night. It was under NVGs, and there was people coming out to meet the aircraft, and they kept dropping the patient, right?
I remember that.
And I was like, I was the PC, and I was tripping out, right? I'm yelling at everybody, and I'm like, why are these guys dropping this guy? What is their problem? And years later, right, I figured out through doing this therapy that they didn't have NVGs on and they couldn't see. So he's in every hole with this patient. Lemons was on it. I don't know.
Yeah, that was Wayne was your crew chief.
Was he?
Wayne was your crew chief. I was on that mission, and that is the exact mission I was thinking in my head. Is the only reason right now that I cannot deal with knee injuries, because they had that guy strapped in so weird, like it was a
yes, and he was missing legs.
No, he wasn't missing his legs. What it was is he was the driver for like a tank or something, and they hit an IED and it shattered all his bones. So they strapped him into this thing, and Lemons was the medic. Wayne, you and Wayne were in Chalk 2. It was me, Bird, and I can't think of his name right now, but the other pilot were in Chalk.
Moyer, wasn't it Moyer?
Maybe. But we were in one. And this guy, they're bringing him out, and they keep dropping him. And at one point, his legs stay on the litter, and the rest of his body falls off. Like, so it's like just at his knee. And like,
so like I tripped about it for years.
And this is one of the things that I found out in my therapy class when I was taking it, like in college, like I was saying. Before that, I didn't have a problem with knee injuries, you know. Like, I could see a knee injury and be like, oh, great. Now I see, like, a knee injury, or somebody even, like you know, bends their knee, like, overextends their knee, like, even a little bit. And I'm like, oh, God. Calm that down,
bro. That's what we would call a small T trauma.
Right.
See, like, yours is not as bad as yours was, right? So you have a visceral response, but you're not having full-on PTSD-like symptoms. Right. I heard the other story from the ambulance driver's point of view. They got that call during shift change, and they grabbed the wrong ambulance. And so the ambulance they grabbed, the gear was being taken out of, and they got into the ambulance that was just coming off shift and brought that guy out because you guys said, get here now. And so they grabbed the wrong truck. Right. And didn't have their knots in the truck, because Michelle was one of the shift leaders for that.
Yeah, I think that was on the way back. That was after we picked them up. Right now we're talking.
Was it 6? Yeah, that's. Where was that? We lived in the same barracks with those guys.
Yeah, but like the thing is, we with what I think what we and Jeff are talking about is actually when we were there. Like we
Yeah,
like we
right.
just got to the mission. Like it was. I remember this
Oh,
night
yeah.
specifically, and like it was like in like a square building.
We
So, like,
landed outside of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like when they brought so that wasn't because I remember hearing about another mission where patients were getting dropped, and it was our guys, it was our ambulance drivers, and they had
No.
grabbed the wrong vehicle and they didn't have their knots.
Yeah. This was a different one. This was when we were actually on site. This was at the where it happened, and then like as we're picking them up, then we're also taking like on the other side of the building. They're like engulfed in a firefight as soon as we come in. Like, the guys see us coming overhead, and then like boom, shit kicks off because it was dark. We were on the NVGs. There was a ton of smoke. We couldn't see the flare or the panel, and
there's wires everywhere.
There's wires everywhere.
We had to go around wires and shit.
Yeah, we're dropping in between buildings, like in a square in between buildings, and as soon as we come in, like boom, tanks kick off over here. More firefights coming here. RPGs start flying everywhere else, and I'm like, let's get it down. Like, we couldn't find the right one. The first time we went through, it was like the wrong bird. It was the wrong signal, and it was like shit, wrong signal. So we had to go back around. And I think it was like 2 or 3 times we circled.
It just went bad.
Like,
it was bad from the beginning, and then just kept getting worse. Right?
And as we get there, like Lemons is in the back doing CPR, and like I'm like, yo, you need help to change out? He's like, yeah, give me a help. So like on the trip back, it was probably like a 30-minute flight back, and like we were in the back, both of us. Like
we might be talking about 2 different missions, believe it or not.
Are we?
Because listen, we had a lot of them like this, but
there was a lot like that.
Like
yeah.
Because
like for the specific mission I'm talking about though, like it was doing this stuff though. Not to cut you off, CJ, honestly.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that part of it. I couldn't see that part of it, and it bothered me. I like them dropping that guy. So like it happened like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And then I realized I didn't have NVGs on. It took me years to figure that out.
Because you needed your brain now, your brain now to look back and see what was going on without being there. Because your emotional state was so activated then. Because not only was it a life or death situation for that person, that we forget that the crew, I know because I was medevac too, the crew itself is going into a life or death situation to get someone else. It's not like you're just protecting yourself. You are knowingly flying into a dangerous area to get someone out. And it's like, okay, as the pilot, especially your lead pilot, now you're emotionally responsible for 4 other people and a patient.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like all these emotions wrapped up, but being that you were sitting on that couch and you were aware that you were sitting on a couch going back to there, even though you were having the same visceral response, your brain was able to process that. Because the dual that's what it was. The bilateral stimulation, right? It was, we call it dual attention. You were here and there at the same time.
It's interesting. It was a really interesting thing. It was very powerful, of course, when I figured that out though, but I was like, oh my God, wow, that's the answer. Like that,
it changed everything.
I can't be mad at those guys anymore because I was blaming those litter bearers, right? I was mad at them.
Yeah.
And then that just went poof. And I was like, it wasn't their fault. Wasn't our fault.
It's amazing.
Wasn't our fault. Somebody's fault.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about with all this, right?
It feels like magic. It's amazing. Yeah.
Like magic is the word for it. For sure.
And to think about it, how long would it have, how many years of talk therapy would it have figured before you would have realized that one little detail that changed everything?
I can't say that it ever would have happened, or it could have, I have no idea really, but that's what did it. So cool, huh?
I remember too, like the sand on that place. Once I jumped out, like it was just powder, and it was like dunes. And I jumped out, and like I was already like shin deep, like just there. Like so they don't have NVGs, and they're like going over these dunes, like small dunes, but like the sand is just so powdered. Like you step in it, it's like shin deep, and they had to come a ways to get us. To get with that guy.
There was nothing easy about that one.
Yeah. So crazy.
So I mean, if I can get to that, other people can get to other stuff.
Right.
Right. And
EMDR, I think it's
yeah, if you would have stayed with that guy, he would have been able to target every single mission that you had a problem with.
Yeah, I believe that. So, at some point I probably have to go do that again.
Yeah.
Just like that, we had a therapy session with Sean. I feel better myself.
Free.
Right?
We should probably get her PayPal address and give her some money.
I am not expecting money. Okay. So and then with the for a therapist, the hard part is because we're always overanalyzing, very bad idea for a therapist, is something we do, to see where you've got your own hangups, and now I've got to go find my own therapist because I'm like, okay, I need this taken care of, this taken care of, this taken care of. I'm tired of worrying about this. I'm starting to make a list, just get all this stuff taken care of, just so I can be clear-headed. And because I'm curious, because they said that there is a case of spontaneous behavior change, right? So for you, for that one sticking point, no more anger. You're like, well, what do I do with myself now? Right? It's like, and then when you realize that your little hangups that you have may be a result of little traumas.
Right.
Like those little baby traumas.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm curious.
It's interesting, man. It's maybe we'll supply you around the country and hit us all. Everybody from that unit, you probably help everybody out.
There are
just like, yeah, I'll do it.
So when we think about my rate's not that high yet. When we think about this, okay, it's like, who do you go to? And so we tell people to find therapists that have been trainings that have been approved by EMDRIA, right? That's the EMDR International Association.
Mm-hmm.
So you want people who've been trained on that, because there are some agencies that are like, this is how you do eye movements. This will fix everything. But they weren't trained. They didn't have 40 hours of training.
Right.
This is because of how powerful it is, this is one of those modalities that you can't ethically try this unless you've been trained.
Gotcha.
I'm still doing, because we have to have supervision after we've been trained in order to say we've been fully trained. I'm still in the middle of my supervision. I finished the training 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So I have to have 10 supervision hours before I can tell people and advertise I am EMDR trained. Right now I can say that I can use EMDR, right? And then there's a certification process after that if you want. But you need somebody who's been trained by, that it's been approved by this association. That way you get somebody who knows what they're doing.
Gotcha.
And not somebody who's just playing around with something they saw on the internet.
Gotcha. And can we do this form of therapy over Skype?
So somebody asked that recently. No joke. Somebody asked that recently. And what you do is you have the camera angle so they can see your hands, and they will tap in time with you.
Okay.
So if you have a client who can't use eye movement, and you don't have the buzzies, right? Or they're somewhere else, then you have them see, you start tapping and they follow you and they tap that way, and they can do it that way.
Like they tap on the desk or whatever.
They tap on their legs.
Okay.
They tap on their legs.
Gotcha. So okay. Free
So
sessions coming by. No wait.
Actually, we're not supposed to practice over state lines, and that includes telemental health. So if you were to see a therapist, you need to see somebody licensed in California. If I saw somebody even over video, they have to be in the state of Georgia. So I have clients in South Carolina because I'm close to the border, but they have to come into my office.
Gotcha.
I can't do telemental health with them because they live in South Carolina.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's why if your counselor asks, where are you? That's why. Because every state has different licensing requirements.
Yeah.
And in fact, California didn't have LPCs until 2016. They only had social workers and MFTs. So, so I think their first group of counselors got licensed in 2016. So all the LPCs in California are pretty brand new.
That's great. I didn't know that.
And so
what's an LPC?
A licensed professional counselor.
Okay. And then you said MFT?
Okay, so crash course in mental health therapies, right? Psychiatrists, those are MDs, right? Psychologists, those are PhDs in psychology, or PsyDs, psychology doctorate, right? Then you have the LPC, professional counselor. My degree is clinical mental health counseling or professional counseling, right? Then you have the MFTs, the licensed marriage and family therapist, right? Then you have these social workers, right? And so there are 5 different people, and they're adding more to this pile because now we have nurse practitioners nurse practitioners can they can diagnose and medicate, right? So your nurse
Wow.
practitioner can fill out prescriptions. They
Right.
can call in prescriptions. So now we have psychiatric nurse practitioners. So now we're up to 6 modalities for mental health.
Wow. Okay.
Psychiatric nurse practitioners, yeah.
Great.
And so, and most people get their mental health drugs from their primary care physician because they went in with a stomach ache and there's no other physical problem other than they're just anxious or, some other weird stuff. They can't sleep because depression leaves body like flu symptoms.
Yeah.
So depression gives you flu symptoms. You're groggy. You could be a little feverish. You get body aches. You don't want to get out of bed. Hypersomnia. Those are flu symptoms, right? Those are also symptoms of mild depression. Mild to moderate, yeah. Severe depression is very obvious, but like if you have like mild to moderate depression and you just kind of feel sick and you're sad and you feel sick, you might be depressed and not necessarily have the flu.
All right. So you're
You might
saying
have ate a bad burrito.
Or you ate a bad burrito, but there's other symptoms that would tell you that you ate bad food.
But yeah, I was just saying. So you're saying since I've my whole life only slept like 4 to 6 hours, I was born depressed?
No. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
I was just joking. Yeah.
No.
Except for today.
We can do a whole psychoanalysis, Sonny, if you want, but I don't think you want that being recorded.
You guys are over state lines. You can't do that.
Right.
All right. So I mean, is there anything else
that's a lot of good information.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about what's going on or how this works or anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover?
I'm thinking. I am not I'm not the expert in this. I made that clear. I just think it's really exciting about how this is going to help people. And I think that it's helpful to veterans that want their symptoms to go away because after you guys make your treatment plan, you don't really have to sit and rehash the whole thing.
Right.
A lot of people just don't want to have to retell these stories. But they want them away. And so it's a modality that'll work without having to sit and retell and rehash these stories, every time you walk in the room. Once you make that original list, you're like, all right, we're going down the next one. We're like, good, we got it, and keep moving forward. And so, and that's how someone has really dealt with it when they're able to talk about it and not have an emotional response. There's still some level of response that's appropriate. If you're still sad, that's fine. If people died, then you should be sad. You shouldn't have so there's still some level of appropriate and your brain knows when to stop. And so that's why we go with, okay, how well do you feel right now?
Right. I mean, I could say for one, I know, after my experience in the military, I'm definitely more numb to death. Right? Like, people be like, "Oh, my dad died, or this person died, or something." I'm like, condolences. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm like, but I mean, it's like it's part of life. Like, I'm not gonna trip out over it. You
don't necessarily have to trip out. It's a very Buddhist frame of mind to be in, actually.
Yeah.
There are people that they created this app called I'm Gonna Croak or something like that, where it reminds you 5 times a day that you're gonna die. Okay. So
nice.
What that does is that reminds you that yes, there is an end to this journey and you need to make good use of the time you have.
Right.
But to be oblivious to the suffering of others, that's a little harsh. But to be aware of death and say it's a part of life and we got to process this stuff is perfectly fine. And so some people need that reminder. Some people don't want it. It's a very Zen way of saying YOLO.
Right. Guys, yeah. No, I'm definitely not oblivious to their pain and that stuff that they're going through, right? But like when I lost my grandpa, I was like, oh man, that sucks. I love that guy, but I wasn't distraught over it. I was glad to see, he had cancer and everything, so I was glad to see he went, but he wasn't struggling, and that was my thing. Well, he's no longer struggling, and I just attributed that to me dealing with death on a daily basis,
So you processed it correctly, and you kind of feel that it's weird that you processed it correctly?
Well, well, yeah, I guess, yeah. Like I didn't realize that I processed it correctly. I just thought maybe.
Well, there's no right or wrong way to process. Let me back up. What I mean was, you understand the process. You are okay with it. You didn't have any psychological reactions, and the fact that you didn't have a psychological reaction is weird to you.
I guess, yeah, because everybody else is crying, and I'm like, well, that's life, So I guess at a point, yeah, I felt like it was something wrong with me because I was okay with it,
Yeah, you might want to talk to somebody because that doesn't sound abnormal to me.
Okay, well then, if there's
that
nothing
doesn't
wrong,
sound that doesn't sound abnormal to me. It's just like when you've been exposed to, when you have a different perspective on what life means, you will react differently than other people. Because like we said with the 2-week-old baby, that is the worst thing that happened to them. So for people who aren't around death a lot, when somebody dies, that is the worst thing that happened to them.
Right. Okay, that makes plenty of sense. Yeah.
That means you just had perspective.
Right. Okay. Boom, cleared. Boom.
I guess the question probably is were you like that beforehand, and is going through what we all went through? Did we have to come up with coping mechanisms to deal with that still serve us now?
I really can't say because I was.
The answer is yes.
I want to say yes, but at the same time, like when I went in, I went in at 17, got out at 25 or whatever, and like I didn't have to deal with death prior to that, so I can't say with 100% certainty that yes or no, right?
I say the answer is yes because every experience we have shapes how we view the world. So if he stubbed his toe every day for a week, he has a very disdained opinion about coffee tables. So like every
I hate
experience every experience changes how we view the world, and how he views the world about death it probably did come from our time in the military. But like, so everything you do makes you the person who you are now. Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
He's got pause face. It's epic pause face.
All right. So yeah, no, I mean that's cool.
Pause.
Right, there he goes again. But yeah, so I think that's good, and I think if we've.
That reminds me when you guys were playing Call of Duty and you guys used to call Rod Skippy.
Right. Yeah.
Hear you.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. He skip around the whole map. Yeah. But
no, I think that's it for my limited knowledge on the subject, and I'm in the process of finishing the initial training, so I could say I'm EMDR trained, and I will be starting the process to get certified. Just because there aren't too many people here that are certified, and I think that we need to give our clients more options.
Right. Well, then, I mean, and for that, like, I mean, how would they find you? Do you have like a website up, whatever?
So I'm on Psychology Today. That's the go-to for most therapists in the United States. Is like you have a Psychology Today page. So if you spell my name correctly, you'll be able to find me. But if you put like therapist in Rankin, I'm in that list, and my picture will come up. That website rotates the therapists that are in town, so that the same person isn't on the top of the list every day. So every day is different. The therapists are in different order. So if you just put in therapist, you put in Rankin, Georgia, I will be in that list, at least on the first page. And so, yeah, but I'm leaning, I'm starting to believe that everybody's got trauma. So trauma informed is where I'm headed. Because you never know what people have. They might think it's something little and it may be something big, or they think it's something big and something little, but at least if you're ready for it, you're ready for it. Right. There are plenty of other modalities that help with trauma that people are unaware of, like things like Qigong and yoga and, Tai Chi. And those things like can help treat trauma. And so it's like you need to be aware of all these modalities so that you can help people get back to where they need to be.
All right. Yeah, I like Muay Thai myself, hitting things.
No, not Muay Thai. I said Qigong, the slow moving stuff, like smooth as water kind of stuff.
Oh, so like jiu-jitsu then. Yeah. All right. I like that too. Choking people out. That's great. Yeah.
No choking.
No. Oh,
No.
okay. Man. All right.
Any mindful movement that makes you aware of your body and where it is in space.
Right.
That help. Those are all treatment modalities for trauma now.
Gotcha.
And yoga has been, there's now research on the effects of yoga for trauma treatment. It's no longer like the Army's been doing it for a while too. So are you stretching in your chair?
Yeah. Are you still frozen over there, Jeff?
No. He's practicing being frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm gonna explore some other modalities, but this is gonna be a big one though in my practice, for sure.
All right, great. Sounds fantastic. And if anybody's in Georgia, it's those are the two websites to go to
Yeah, just go to my Psychology Day page. It links to the website for the office and other stuff, and just a quick way to find me because I always have that up. And so that's the easiest way to get a hold of me right now.
All right, great. So if you're in Georgia, you can call Shante or message her. If you're not in Georgia, we found out today that she won't do anything for you because she enjoys her license and does not want to lose it. So
correct. But there are, what people don't know is you can call a therapist and ask them questions, interview them. If you don't like them, call someone else. Don't just assume because you called them you have to make an appointment. So call and ask questions and see if they do the things that you're interested in. What do they do for what's their modalities, what do they practice? And so if you don't want to deal with exposure therapy and that trauma person only does exposure therapy, you don't have to make an appointment with them. Go find somebody else.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Sounds
but that
good.
website has people all over the country on it. So wherever you are in the country, you can find a therapist at that website.
Gotcha. Is it zip code or is it just
just city and state?
City and state. Okay, cool. Even better. Great.
I will send you all the links to my stuff.
All right. Yeah. Must do that. I can put that up and put it in the description and everything else. So that'll be great. But all right, guys. I think that's it for today. Oh, we're almost at 2 hours today. Good stuff.
Wow.
Hour and 42. So yeah, that's good. Learned a lot today. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Left Seat, Right Seat. If you liked what you heard, just go ahead, hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. And come back next week for another episode. And also follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all your other podcast venues. All right, thanks guys. Have a good one, and we'll see you again later. Bye.
See ya.